Hey guys, welcome back to Hypnovision Studios. I am your host, Nicholas. Today we're going to be continuing our topic on the imagination itself. We're going to be discussing secrets of Egypt and how all of this really does tie back into the imagination. If you're new to my channel, thank you for stopping by. I greatly appreciate you. I do hope you find something here that causes you to subscribe and even share with a friend. For everyone else, thank you for coming back. I greatly appreciate you. So guys, if you didn't catch my last video, it was on the imagination being the sexiest thing you have. Everything is tied in when it comes to the imagination. And this is a topic that I often discuss on my channel because the imagination is truly magic. It is the one thing that you cannot see, but you know is there. It is like magnetism. You cannot see the forces, but you know that they are at play. So what you identify with is the entity within. Now, guys, I break this down with spelling a whole lot. So when we start to dive into symbolism and we start to dive into Egypt itself and hieroglyphs and the different symbols that are associated with Egypt, you have to understand that symbols or pictures, right? They contain an awful lot of information. So a picture is worth 1,000 words is a quote that you've probably heard before, and it reigns true in this situation. Because in order to describe something with words, if you were to describe an image, it takes an enormous amount of words to build the image for someone else's imagination to see inside of their head. So pictures do contain way more words when it comes to the description itself. That's why it says that pictures are worth 1,000 words. So keep that in mind as we move forward, because symbolism is a way to condense a whole lot of information into a small image and be able to tell a story or record a historic event. There's all kinds of ways that symbolism can be used to exchange information, to exchange data, or to record data. Our DNA works much in the same way. The sound that leaves our voice is carrying information. Most people on the surface level would think that the word is the information, but there is much more to it. There is the tone of what is being said. There is the way it is being expressed, the facial expression of the person who is saying it. So there are so many ways that we are constantly communicating, and it's not just with words. We are communicating with the images on our face, how we take action, so actors, right? There's so much here, guys, and we're going to break it down from the eye of Ra, the eye of Horus, and we're going to talk about the left brain, the right brain, the two different hemispheres, and even the third eye itself. The pineal gland, or pineal gland, how some say it, is what is known as the seat of consciousness, the seat of God, as some people say. You would normally see the pictures of Jesus hanging on the cross, and you would have the two crosses on either side of him, and one was a thief and one was an honest person. So we start to understand, right, the cross that is going right through the center of the human imagination, right? The left brain, the right brain is divided right down the center, and there is a horizon line that is going right between both. So we're going to break all of this down, and I hope that you guys stick around because I am going off of very little notes for this video. But I want to start off with saying, or not just saying, but I want to start off with this quote from Napoleon Hill. He's a very great author. He talks about Think and Grow Rich is one of his books. There's the sexual transmutation, which is turning sexual energy and diverting it into other means. We'll get into that also. But since I've recently done a video about imagination and sexual energy, I won't stay too long on that topic. When two or more people coordinate in a spirit of harmony and work towards a definitive goal, they place themselves in a position through that alliance to absorb power directly from the great universal storehouse of infinite intelligence. This is from Napoleon Hill. Again, guys, he's a very great author. A lot of this does go back to the imagination, how we are imagining and seeing things inside of our own mind's eye. And when we start to discuss things like Egypt itself, you can't really talk about Egypt without acknowledging the Great Pyramids, right? So let's look at this again. A pyramid, right? If our pineal gland is sitting right here, right? And we go left and then we go right. Is that not a pyramid, right? We go left and we go right. So between the two hemispheres, the pendulum is swinging between logic and emotion. Logic and emotion. This is neurodivergence, where the two hemispheres are diverging into the center, which is known as the third eye, the pineal gland. And yes, it can become calcified. And there are other things that can affect it. So some of these things is chemistry, right? Because there is a circadian rhythm that is happening in our body. The chemistry can be thrown off. And if the chemistry is thrown off, then guess what? Through our diet, our nutritional intake, and also our sexual energy as being expelled through the body, especially through men, through leaking of the life-giving force, then it cannot make its way back up to the mind and renew the mind, Romans 12:2. So there is a lot here, guys, when we start to really look at what does it all mean, right? Because we can sit there and take our attention and look at all the things that we can discover in Egypt, but it's not until we turn it inward, we turn our attention inward into ourselves, that we start to see how these things are actually within the human body. That's truly amazing to me. So the eye of Ra, let's see. Ra means radius, right? The sunlight is a circle, is a circumference, it is a radius. So let's start with the eye of Ra, and we're going to start to work our way through this a little bit. Again, guys, this is all the study notes I have. So if I jump around a little bit during this video, that's why. The origin of the eye of Ra, it represents the sun, protection, royal power, and divine authority. It is seen as the all-seeing eye, often associated with the pineal gland, third eye. In modern esoteric interpretations, it's masculine and active, Ra being the sun god, radiating outward energy. The eye is often drawn as part of sacred geometry, holding a symbolic connection to the golden ratio and human perception. So Ra stands for radius. The radius is the line from the center of a circle to any point of its edge. In symbolism, the radius represents connection, a line between the center of the soul and the external world, the boundaries. So pi is a transcendental number and connects the circle circumference to its diameter. That's very interesting, guys. So the inner soul, which would be our innermost, our inner child, so to speak, that which is within us, that is not seen by others, the getting tongue-tied here, guys. The imagination itself, this is where no one can see us except for what we are experiencing, feeling, and living. So it's very interesting once you start to understand, right? So why is it that there is a sun god and we have the Son of God? Jesus is known as the Son of God, but we also have a Son God. There is so much that happened between the time of Egypt and the Roman Empire being involved and the Bible being written. There's a meme that I can think of right now where it shows a guy pointing to a book, and it literally is like, it is written in this book, it has to be this way or no way at all. So this comes to the occulted knowledge, right? People who do not know any better, do not know themselves, will fall for the definitions and meanings of someone else because someone else knows, not them. So therefore, if they take on what someone else has said as true, then they will also defend something, whether they know if it's true or false. And that can become a very dangerous, slippery slope for anyone to take that type of mindset of it is my way or the highway, even if you do not know that something is true or false. So imagination here, again, guys, it is very important to really discern things and to slow your response time down sometimes, because if we get into this highly reactive state, then we can start to defend things that's not even true. And then we can make ourselves look like a fool later on because we defended something that wasn't true. And when it comes to imagination, this happens every single day. There's 8 billion people on this planet. And there are 8 billion people, and how many of those people are highly tuned in or highly aware of what is going on in their imagination at any given time? Last year, I wrote on a piece of paper and said this to myself an awful lot. Active imagination, meaning to be aware of what it is I am imagining at any given time. And there were a lot of times where I realized that this circumstance, right? Circumstance was not in line with things I had imagined. You don't imagine entering into a relationship with anybody and it being toxic. You don't imagine it being a bad relationship. You don't imagine it being struggle love. You don't imagine it being love hate. So you kind of see where I'm going with this. We don't, as human beings, typically imagine this type of stuff. So we start to understand that the imagination itself is truly magic because you cannot see what is in someone else's imagination. You can observe the things that they say, but most importantly, their actions. That saying reigns true here, guys. Actions speak louder than words, because there is a process that happens when we have a belief. First, it enters our mind as an idea. That idea is assessed mentally, and then we form a belief around something, and then from that belief we take action. And that is so much more revealing than things that we say, because it is human nature to say things out of the side of our neck so many times because we are highly reactive, not proactive in what it is that we are using our imagination for. So this starts to really reveal the difference in being entertained, right? So somebody that's entertaining us would captivate our attention, draw our attention into something. It is like being in a form of hypnosis. We are hypnotized by what somebody else is doing, and we are paying attention to them, not to ourselves. It's like the old snake charmers, right? We've seen those people who play the flute and the snake falls under a spell. Isn't that interesting? The serpent's path to power. So yes, the serpent's path to power, right? In the religious context of things, they talk about crushing the head of the snake, but we also see the caduceus visualized with two snakes wrapped around a staff. That actually represents the spinal cord, right? Going up the spine. The two snakes are the different halves of the nervous system and how they have intertwined like DNA. The tree of life is your nervous system, and the fruit between your legs is the fruit of life, the forbidden fruit that you should not leak out. Interesting. So guys, let me get back on topic here. So when we think about the eye of Ra and the eye of Horus, we typically would visualize whatever we've seen on TV or different forms of media or entertainment. The eye of Ra being the radius of the sun, this circumference, and we start to understand that there is the eye of Houris, hormones. Houris is how we measure the hours of day because it is tracking Ra, right? The sun. The sun moves across the sky. We have 12 hours times 2, which is a 24 hours. So it's a daytime and a nighttime cycle. Our circadian rhythm is attached to it. So there is a lot of interesting things that is happening when we discuss the eye of Ra and the eye of Horus. So let's break down the eye of Horus. The Egyptian myth, Horus, this is a story aspect of it. Horus lost his eye in a battle with Set. What is Set? Do you set your clock based upon the hour of the day? Horus, hours. This eye was magically restored by Thoth. Thoth represents thoughts, right? Symbolizing healing and restoration. It also symbolizes protection, health, wholeness, and regeneration. Mathematical proportions. Each part of the eye represents a fraction, either a half or a quarter, etc. The eye of Horus also represents intuition and inner vision, akin to the third eye. Very interesting. It is also tied into the hours of the day. The word hour comes from the Latin word hora, which traces back to the Greek hora, meaning season or time of day. Hours measure cycles, sunrise to sunset. So when it says that Horus lost his eye in the battle of Set, and we were thinking about how we set a clock, right? If he lost its eye in a battle with Set, that means darkness. We have 12 hours of light, 12 hours of darkness. So darkness. What is the imagination when we close our eyes? Do you see images mentally in your imagination, or do you see darkness when you close your eye? So if you want to know, is your third eye working? Is your pineal gland calcified, or is it functioning properly? The chemicals inside of our body is partly to do with this, and also the types of food that we take in. Why do you think there is fasting in some religions where we have to cleanse the body and purify the body? So there is a lot of stuff that is happening here, guys. So I heard this recently, and I do think there is some truth to this. When you close your eyes, if you're not able to see anything but darkness, there's a high probability that your pineal gland is calcified. Your chemistry within your body is probably out of balance also. So how do we understand this? How do we get to really break all this down? The chemistry that is happening inside of our body is a circadian rhythm of our hormones. Our day and night cycles are dictated by the sun and the moon, which takes us back to understanding the eye of Ra and the eye of Horus. Because if we look at the pineal gland as sitting in the center, and we imagine a pendulum sitting right here as this pin, and it swings left and it swings right, the eye of Horus and the eye of Ra, we are oscillating between the two. That is interesting because the left brain is known as the logical side or the analytical side. I said this in a video before. Everything is black and white. It is true or false, yes or no, up or down. It is very analytical. While the other side of the mind, the creative side of the mind, is really tied to our intuition, our emotions. So you've heard the saying before, to enter the right hemisphere is to enter into creation itself. There is this whole idea of being shut off into fight or flight, which would be pushing ourselves out of the creative side over into the logical side, which would mean the pendulum could be stuck to one side and you have lost your eye. Get it? It is not set in the center. It is over in the fight or flight. That's very interesting, guys. So This goes back to chemistry because on a 29.5 day cycle, our body is always renewing itself. There are so many functions happening inside of the human body that is always happening behind the scenes. These things are hidden from you. That is the very definition of occulted, to be hidden from you. Just like the Great Sphinx is messing its nose, that what is hidden from you is your imagination. We get caught up in the outside world. We have our attention pulled out into the outside world, and we can live out there most of our lives and never really return home to self. Returning home to self would be to take part of your attention and pull it back to yourself and turn it inward and start to use meditation to really go up into the upper dome. And it's very interesting that I say that because I have something about that right here about the internal pharmacy, which is the mind. The mind is able to influence the body, and it is able to cause the body to release hormones. So we can intentionally, through the power of our own mind and our own thoughts, cause the body to release hormones, which is the healing and regeneration of the eye of Houris. So we can use our hormones to change and heal the body. And I'm getting hit with goosebumps here, guys. We each within us have the capacity to crank out our own internal pharmacy, self-generating DHEA from the inside out. And sitting atop of this list of natural ways to uncap the old DHEA firehouse is meditation. That is such an interesting thing. So the fight or flight mode that we all can enter into, think about the first time you felt nervous. Your heart was racing. Your palms were sweaty. Your muscles were tense. Your breathing was short. Your hands and feet were cold. And what was the last thing on your mind? Sex. When we are stressed out, our major organs hoard blood to continue working properly, diverting precious energy and resources away from less core bodily systems like reproduction. Now, the problem with fight or flight mode is that while it's meant to work temporarily, many of us get stuck there, and our survival modes were not designed to be on constant alert. Instead of escaping tigers and bears, we are accidentally tripping our primal fear instincts through non-life-threatening death situations, job stress, relationship stress, financial stress, etc. So what does all this have to do with meditation? Well, guys, again, this is about being able to instruct the mind to release hormones to take us out of fight or flight, to get back into that creative side of the mind. Because once we get over into the logical side of the mind, we are trying to control everything through a black and white filter. We become cold and we become callous and we become less empathetic to others and how they are feeling, how they are experiencing the reality that is closely tied around us. We all have to share bits and pieces of reality with each other. While every individual person experiences a very unique version of reality to themselves, we still share a version of reality with each other. And that goes back to what I was saying a while ago with Napoleon Hill about two people being in alignment, being able to magnify the goals between the two people. And this requires people to be able to share what is within their imagination and be able to visualize a bigger vision than both of them that is in the same alignment, in the same direction. So it is not just about becoming rich, for example. Anyone can become rich, but if you're not good with money, then having money that you would spend without being able to really think about it would ultimately lead you being broke again. So there has to be a greater vision than two people combined for those two people to start moving in the same direction. If not, there's going to be constant tension because we will constantly be looking back, recounting, taking account of the past, and pointing fingers at each other and saying, well, this is how I imagined it, but you didn't follow through with it. And the other person would say, well, this is how I imagined it, but you didn't follow through with your end of the bargain. So this starts to get into the whole concept of ideally or idealization, which is what happens when we are in fight or flight. We have shut off, I said this before, one side or one hemisphere of our mind. And if we are in a logical state of consciousness, we are in a state of fight or flight, and we get around someone that is really intuitive, but maybe they are not very logical, then we have what would be known as a narcissist and empath dynamic, meaning that one person is really closed off to their feelings and emotions. Now, you can't get away from feelings and emotions. Everybody has them. So even if you come across as being cold and shut off with your emotions, they are still there. You're just not acknowledging them, and you're pushing them down, trying to hide your emotions, but you can't hide something that is seen through your actions. So the fact that you're not able to discuss and verbally open up about the energy, right? When we think about emotions, it's energy. So that's why I say you can't really hide your emotions. You can try to cover them up, but they are still revealed through your actions. So there's really no way to hide that. But you are starting to see what I mean by this. You might have that dynamic where someone is highly creative, but they don't have the structure to give form to their creation. Or you might have someone that is very analytical, but they don't have the ideas of how to create something from scratch, because they have a lot of structure. I have a lot of understanding of what a structure is, but there is no creative ideas that are born from that because of the fight or flight or being shut off between the two different hemispheres. So it is very interesting when we start to look at the eye of Ra and the eye of Horus, and we start to understand the circumference of things. The sunlight, right, is what gives us the contrast, because light does what? It illuminates, but it also creates a contrast. When light hits something, it creates a shadow. It creates depth through the contrast. When we start to see what is known as 3D, we see the depth of something, and you can learn to draw and use shading in an image to make it look like it has depth to it. So that is part of the imagination also, being able to see very vivid, very detailed images inside of your imagination, inside of your mind's eye. And this is illuminated how? Well, you have to understand the electrical impulses and the neuro pathways. Again, guys, we're talking about neurodivergence, where the two hemispheres are coming in and feeding into the mind's eye. I think about the flux capacitor on Back to the Future, where it shows the two little lines coming into the center and feeding out through the bottom. That is much in the same way that this is working, right? So we understand that the impulses are coming from where? We have those tiny crystals in our pineal gland that are piezoelectric. I've said this half a dozen times on my channel, and I probably will again in the future. So those impulses are doing what? They are little sparks. And every time there's a spark, it's illuminating something in the imagination. There's flashes of light that are just shooting around your brain nonstop, all the time. And the stronger these impulses are, the brighter they are. And the more illuminated something becomes, you can see the images in your imagination. So when you look at it this way, and then you understand the statement that if you close your eyes and see nothing but darkness, then you have weak impulses in the brain. The neural pathways are dim. It is not very much illumination to light up the imagination. So how do we fix that? How do we reverse that and start to really crank up the imagination and create a situation where we give spark to the creative ideas within and we start to manifest those outward? Meditation, guys, it changed my life. Meditation is absolutely, to me, it's the fastest way to reverse this whole process, because during meditation, we are deeply bringing everything back deeply inside of our soul, inside of ourself, inside of the human body. And we are able to focus through the imagination and magnify what is within. So if we want to change our emotional state of being, instead of thinking about, I'll be happy when X, Y, and Z happens, we can focus on the emotional state itself. We can go to a meditation and say, I want to focus on what oxytocin feels like. I want to focus on what endorphins feel like when they are being released in my body. I want to focus on the 4 major chemicals like serotonin. I want to focus on the feelings of happiness, joy, love, peace, and fulfillment. And guess what, guys? It starts to work. And the more that you practice this, the quicker it starts to work. And you will start to understand that much of what I've been saying this whole time is just not me talking out the side of my neck. You start to understand that, yes, the chemistry in your body is directly tied to our thoughts. And so we understand that thoughts are electric and emotions are magnetic. And between the two of those is the circumference. And the oscillation is creating a frequency and a vibration, right? So we feel a vibe about a certain person or a certain thing or a task. The vibe feels good, the vibe feels bad. How often am I worrying and thinking about different situations and scenarios that I cannot change? So the oscillation between left and right, that pendulum can swing really fast, or you can really get inside of your own head and be over here in fight or flight and just overthink everything and not even be creative because you're stuck over here. You're stuck in a logical, analytical, over-analyzing every single thing. And we're just not put on this earth to sit around and analyze. We are put here to observe, to witness creation itself, to experience creation itself. Our fears are primal. They come from the primal parts of the body. The animalistic side of the body, which was, what do humans need to feel? They need shelter, they need comfort, and they need food and security. When we find ourselves in situations where we don't feel secure, it arouses our fears. It arouses different aspects like worrying. It arouses those instincts within us that can cause our body to start releasing other chemicals that start to lower our vibrational state. So there is a lot to this when you start to really dig deep into it, guys. The chemistry, right? Chemistry is everything. And when we talk about Egypt, we can't really ignore the chemics. So if you look at the meaning of and significance, and I have something pulled up here for this, and I'll try to put it on the screen. Kemek is the name that the ancient Egypt people called their country. Kemek, thus, the name of the language as scholars refer to it. Written Kemek uses a combination of 22-letter alphabet and pictograms that represent things, concepts, and consonant combinations. Some of the pictograms, however, represented not only linguistic elements, but also concepts. These particular pictograms are called chemic symbols. While these symbols had important shared meanings to ancient Egyptian people, the study of them and their use as a philosophical and religion enjoyed a revival in the 1970s. So guys, chemistry, chemics, Eye of Ra, radius, sun god, Eye of Horus, hours, hormones, circadian rhythm, sun, moon. What we are missing is another understanding, and that is the Egyptian Ankh. So when you see images of the Ankh, we typically see that with a straight shaft and a loop like this, right? When we see a cross in Christian and religious terms, is just a cross. I want to point out something to everyone right here, right now, and I want to do this as honest as I can. When you understand that symbolically, when you see the number 1, when we understand the male symbolism as being a straight line and female being a 0, you start to understand something here, guys. If a 1 line is male, where is the female in this cross? Where? How can you bring life with 2 male put together? The Ankh, known around the world, has a lot of different meanings, but one of the very absolute meanings of it is life itself. So the male enters into the portal of the female, and you can create a new life form. So without that understanding, you are trying to use logic to create with, right? So you start to also understand that through many different perceptions, there is the act of creating a new life through intercourse. There is also what is known as the feminine mind and the masculine mind. So we are oscillating between masculine and feminine. And most people on the surface will laugh at this because they have never really spent any time meditating. They have never really spent much time using their imagination because no one taught them how to. Nobody taught them how to go into a meditation and start to free their mind from all of the things that they were told on the outside world. A lot of times people will point to the Bible and say, this is how it is. It's this way or no way. And to be honest, that's probably one of the most foolish things anyone can do. Instead of sitting in meditation, listening to the I am within. I am that I am. So I know these are some very crude drawings, and that's okay. The whole meaning behind this is to highlight. So we have 2 straight shafts that create a cross, and then we have the Ankh, which is a circle, a line, and another cross going through it. So we can either cross over or cross through the understanding of life itself through different perceptions. We have that feminine aspect, the creative aspect, the intuition aspect of things. We have the structure, the male, the masculine, which is the builder, the provider that gives the creation something to have structure to fill into. It's very interesting when we think about the Eye of Horus and the Eye of Ra, and we understand the pyramid, the triangle. So the triangle, again, guys, we are oscillating between left and right brain, and if we are shut off into a fight or flight, then we are only really predominantly into one side or the other. I read recently where when a man starts to heal his feminine wounds, for example, he will get more into that feminine energy. Why is that? I thought that was very interesting because I experienced that actually. And so naturally, on the flip side of things, if a woman is healing her father wounds, for example, maybe she never really had a lot of structure to pour herself into. So there's a lot that really, it kind of resonated with me when I started to look at things through this perceptive lens to understand, right? There's a thing that I read when it came to dating and narcissism itself, where a narcissistic person will build an idealization of a person inside of their head, and then they will try to project that onto someone and make that person fit their ideal of their perfect person. And when that person cannot live up to that standard or cannot meet expectations of that idolized person within their imagination, then they will get mad, my way or the highway. You did not fit into the mold that I created for you inside of my imagination. So again, we have to understand that the imagination, much like an author, can write stories and have many different characters within a story. Those different characters still come from the author's imagination. So if I am the author and I am writing a book and I have 12 different characters in my book, then I have 12 different personalities or 12 different archetypes of people that I have created through my own imagination. As where someone who is a narcissist has a monolithic style imagination, meaning they are the center. It is like me against the world, me against everyone, me against or me for. It is all about me, 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 me in a narcissistic person's mind. They have not formed the proper imagination to be able to have that two-way communication through the imagination. So we understand that they have created the image of a person of the opposite gender inside of their head, and they are projecting that onto everyone, trying to figure out who is going to fit that ideal person. And they will love bomb or find a quality in a person that they really like, and they say, well, you know what? This person has all these traits of people I've dated before, but they also have this trait that I've never experienced. So let me acquire this. Because in their mind, it is a very godlike complex, and it sounds counterintuitive. This is where we start to understand black magic. We start to understand the other side or the other equation of duality, things that are hidden, right? Because inside of that person's imagination, they have built the image of their person, but they cannot control it, but they try to. Possession is one of those things. Envy is another. So there are different ways that they will try to control and force that person to fit into that mold or narrative. And when it does not work out, they will discard that person. They will throw that person to the curb like an object. And that is where we start to really dig deep into the understanding of narcissism itself. Now, in the Bible, it talked about Nephilim. Nephilims were giants, right? And to a child, an adult that is in a childlike mentality could seem like a giant. So there are so many things in the Bible and through symbolism and everything and imagination that help me to really decipher and discern things in the outside world, not by what other people define it as, but through my own inner understanding through imagination, which is the Creator's gift to us all. We all have that gift. And when we can imagine lovingly of other people, we don't have to force someone to fit into our ideal image that we created for them. I do not want someone to be forced into a relation with me because I cannot articulate what I desire, what I wish, how I would like to experience things. So this whole process for me, learning to create content for YouTube, learning to use meditation, and learning how to shift my inner emotional state. So this is the shifting of reality, right? What is real to me shifts and changes based upon my emotional state. And this is something that everyone out there can do for themselves. That emotional state, being able to shift into a different state of being and get away from this whole paradigm and energy dynamic where it is what is known as the narcissist and empath paradigm, because it is often said that an empathic person will draw in and attract a narcissistic person. Why is that? Because a narcissistic person who has never experienced love in their own heart will try to elicit that from someone who is highly empathetic, because they can relate to the pain that a narcissistic person feels. And an empathic person wants to give to another, but the empathic person has never learned to give to themselves. So the dynamic is set up like that, and they draw each other in, and it can become something that we get intertwined with, and we have to learn lessons from both perspectives. The narcissistic person has to learn to love themselves. They have to learn to give to themselves that which they have never had. So meditation is one of the easiest ways for someone who has these type personality traits to learn to love themselves. Likewise, empathic person, they know what love feels like. They can also be empathetic to how other people are feeling. But the one thing that a empathic person has to learn for themselves is when to put up boundaries, right? The boundary around self. We can be empathetic. We can understand when someone is going through a rough time in their life, and we can encourage them. But we cannot allow that to become a situation where someone is able to cross our boundaries and continuously invade our inner boundaries and make us feel bad, right? There are situations where a narcissistic person will use things of the past to make a person feel bad in the present moment. This is constantly bringing up the past, reliving the past, or either using situations that would make an empathetic person feel bad for another person. And so this is emotional manipulation, which is manipulating energy itself, which does affect our actions, because if we start to allow someone to emotionally manipulate us, it changes our belief system. What we believe about a narcissistic person, we take action. Whether we see that person as a narcissist or not, if we believe that they are experiencing something in their life and they are sad, we feel bad for them and we want to help them. But when that becomes a crutch and it becomes a pattern, and it can also become something where the empathic person feels responsible for the narcissistic person. And that is probably one of the worst situations a human being can find themselves in. It is where the abuser or the victim falls in love with the abuser and feels responsible for the abuser. That is really backwards thinking and backwards life experience in total. So the understanding of all this, guys, is really interesting once you start to understand energy dynamic itself. When a narcissistic person has a collapse, it is when they finally wake up, when they finally become aware of what they have been doing with their imagination. It is like finally having your eyes opened and seeing reality in its truest sense. Going around and emotionally manipulating people, mental abuse is another one that I don't think people on the surface level really think about too often, but it is something that happens. When we try to mentally or play those mind games with people, the mind games end up affecting the emotions. It is the first step to getting to the emotional abuse. So a person that has a narcissistic personality type does not respect boundaries of other people. They just don't. And they think that they are the center of everything, when in all actuality, they are only center of their own imagination, what they are creating with their imagination. So you start to understand that imagination is really magic. It is the unseen things that we are experiencing, but we cannot see. Magic, magnify, magnetism. We are attracting in that which is either the opposite or alike. It doesn't make sense when you look at a magnet that you can attract something of the same likeness, but it is true, because people like to be around other like-minded people. So we start to understand the electrical aspect is what is creating those sparks when the pineal gland is vibrating with those piezoelectric crystals and is creating impulses, and the chemistry, the chemicals is coming up and is being charged. And then it is going back down into the nervous system and spreading out through the tree, right? We put fertilizer on the ground and it goes into the roots. And then it carries the nutrients up into the tree. And the tree produces better fruit. It produces stronger limbs. There are cause and effect to all of this. Likewise, if we pour poison into the ground, it's going to go into the roots and it's going to come back out of the soil up into the tree, and you will start to observe where the tree is starting to die or wilter or wilt from the poison that we put into the roots. So we can think of the human soul as below the surface, right? The mind is above the surface, the soul is below the surface, and everything that is planted into the soul will eventually grow. And what you focus on grows. Where you put your focus, your energy flows. So if we focus on lack, we focus on the things that we don't have, or we focus on the things that we don't want, we are magnifying all of those things. Likewise, if we focus on all the things that we do have, all the reasons that we should be able to feel gratitude and all of these wonderful emotions associated with it, we are focusing on the green flags, right? So let's just be simple with it. Red flag or green flag. You could focus on all green flags or focus on red flags. You could also be in a situation where you understand that when you awaken to things and you start to realize that, hey, I'm really not like these people. I'm different. I don't want to be around these people. Why? Because they are starting to affect how you are seeing things, how you are perceiving life itself. It goes back to the understanding of, if I was an alcoholic and I wanted to quit drinking, then I would not want to go to a bar. I would not want to be around people that are drinking. Same thing for smoking. Same thing for any type of addiction. That's why they say if you want to be a millionaire, you have to act like a millionaire, think like a millionaire, and surround yourself with people that have that same mindset. Even people that are already millionaires, those are the type of people that you want to be around because of influence. So if you want to stay broke, you hang around people that do broke things. And I mean this genuinely, and I mean this honestly. There's a saying, show me your 5 friends and I'll show you your future. Because your friends influence you and you influence your friends through reinforcement, through things like gossip, things like talking about other people to make yourself look good. These are all real things, guys. These things really happen. And the less that we take our time and focus on these things, the more we can focus on other things. And it's really interesting that Egypt itself, while this video you would think on surface would be all about all these grand mysteries of Egypt, this is actually about the human body itself. The word human, right? Hue is colors. It is the range of contrasts that make up the human. If we are created in the Creator's image, then the light that is hitting the human body is blocked, and then it creates a shadow. The shadow is created in the image of what is standing in between the light and the shadow itself. So we get the contrast and the outline of what a human body looks like. Because light is shining on us, we are blocking the light and creating a shadow. Very interesting. We have to think differently, think with our imagination, and allow ourselves to also use the creative side of our mind, because it is intuition, it is imagination, it is the mental images, but most importantly, there is a feminine aspect to it. So, yes, if I'm writing a romantic story, I need to be able to take into account the thoughts, emotions, and fears, or either the other emotional aspects of a female in order to write a story about how she sees the male that I'm writing about in the story. Likewise, there has to be a concept within myself that can take on the male aspect and the female aspect and write them into a story. This is why I say, and there is lots of proof that backs this up with narcissism or narcissistic personalities, that it is only about them, and they have created this image of the opposite sex within their mind that they have to force everyone to fit into, because they cannot allow, they have to control. They cannot allow, they have to control. I'm going to repeat it one more time. They cannot allow, they have to control. So, yes, there's a lot to this, guys, when you stop and think about it. The imagination really is everything. It is truly all that there is. And the whole idea of Christ and the crystals and the spelling. Spelling is a manipulation of sound, and sound creates a vibration and it creates a tone. So if we are not able to match a vibrational tone harmonically, then we create distortion. And anything that is distorted creates bad vibration. And when there's a bad vibration, not only does it sound bad to your ears, it's destructive. The levitation, right, would be sound frequency pushing something up. And I've talked about levitation before. How would a frequency really work in its smoothest form? I thought about this a lot. If you're out in the ocean and you're in the middle of a storm, right, the waves are going to have a lot of high peaks and a lot of low lows, and they could be choppy. So, of course, going across the surface is going to be very chaotic. So I would imagine waves being really, really kind of just chaotic, right? You can't really travel across the surface very well like that. However, if we tighten those waves up, how much faster can we travel across something that is more smooth than something that is choppy? That's what it boils down to. So our thoughts are the same way. Once we enter into a higher conscious state and equalize the left and the right brain, this is where we start to understand hemisynchronization, as in hemisphere, between the left and the right hemisphere. We start to equalize, right, our conscious thoughts, because they are choppy. They are not harmonized across the pineal gland, right? So fight or flight, we cut ourselves off and we are really logical. We are trying to control everything. We kind of like tune out of our creative side, and we don't allow ourselves to feel emotionally fulfilled. We don't allow ourselves to have ideas that are creative, and we try to control everything, and we are shut out from the creative side of things. So it is very interesting when you stop and think about it. once we start to harmonize between both hemispheres, we start to equal out or equalize our conscious thoughts. And it allows us to travel between the left and the right a lot quicker, a lot faster. You get it? So, meditation is one of those things that is very interesting, and there's no right way or wrong way. The biggest key to it is to learn to sit still, to stop thinking so much, because there is a lot of different language and a lot of different symbols and images that come through our imagination that can reveal a whole lot to us. And it is the human experience that is the most amazing thing to me. Learning about other people, listening to other people, and allowing myself to just experience things and not observe my inner thoughts with a place of judgment. We can't really control our thoughts. Our thoughts are like a radio station. So we are tuning into different things. So trying to control your thoughts puts us in that fight or flight. If we can't control it, then we try to destroy it or push it away or not acknowledge it, when we can just observe it and acknowledge that something is there and decide consciously to not give it any energy. So very interesting things, guys, that, the occulted things, which really means hidden. Like, what is black magic? Let's talk about that before I close this video. Black magic, right? If we understand that the imagination itself is magic. Magic is the unseen. Magnets attract each other, but the force that attracts them to each other is the unseen force. We know the magnets are being pulled together by magnetism, magic. So imagination is magic. And if I say, if you close your eyes and can't see anything, does that mean black magic? Because when you close your eyes, you see nothing but darkness. So what is white magic? What is to be a light bringer or light barrier would be to be able to close your eyes and see images that are illuminated in the imagination or the mind's eye. So in its basic sense, to me and to my understanding, black magic doesn't necessarily mean that someone has bad intentions. Sometimes black magic is just simply not having the inner knowing. And that doesn't necessarily mean that a person is bad. However, there can be a lot of situations where the intention of a person is just pure evil. And that's where discernment comes into trying to understand the actions of a person, what they're thinking, what they are feeling. But again, actions speak louder than words. So if you understand when a police officer would say something is premeditated, it means that the thought happened, then a belief was formed around that thought, and then an action was carried out. So that was premeditated. It's like pre-attending a practice. Through the imagination, we see the event before it happens, and then we carry it out. So when I see people that try to hold literal definitions to the Bible, I start to understand the difference in someone that has the capability to see in the dark versus someone who just repeats things that they read, because everything in the Bible was first written and inspired by the imagination. And then it was manifest through language, written onto paper, and then other people read it. And then they take on those aspects as true or false. They form beliefs around those. That's why I say some people can defend things that are not true, but defend it with such fierce ferocity that they believe that it is true, and that reality applies to everyone. That is a bit of projection that is going on there. So we all have to have a bit of discernment and a bit of self-honesty when it comes to these type things. I'm going to close out this video with this graphic here. This is from Napoleon Hill, and it's about reading graphics. The subconscious mind, the brain, the sixth sense, which I have talked about before, being all 5 of the senses making up the sixth. Desire, faith, auto-suggestion would be to work on your self-talk, to start to change the tide of how you think about yourself. Very interesting. We have the imagination, organized planning, and decision making. Sexual transmutation, redirecting energy from physical expression to achieving desires. There are a lot of great authors out there, guys. Napoleon Hill's one of them. Neville Goddard is another, with The Awakened Imagination, The Power of Awareness. There's Bob Proctor's another wonderful one. Earl Nightingale. There are so many wonderful people out there that really have brought a lot of this stuff to the state of awareness to begin with. So a lot of what I'm saying is not anything new. There are a lot of things that back up what I am saying. But meditation, guys, is something that I use regularly. And I highly suggest anyone out there who has never tried it to at least look into it, maybe give it a go. And I promise you, it will change your life. And with that, guys, I'll see you on the next one.